your female lead in Shallan and your male lead in Kaladin never interact ever. The entire book, the entire story, they don't say a word to each other. They don't know each other exist. So that just the fact that you have a female lead and a male lead that fans are going to want them to interact and they don't for the entire story makes it really hard to do in a movie. You can do that in a TV show because you can have, you can jump back and forth between characters over here, characters over there, and it works better that way. But to have it at the end of at the end of the story, they don't even meet yet. How do you have a full resolution of a movie without your female lead and your male lead meeting? It just wouldn't work. Let's talk about The Way of Kings going forward from a pop culture perspective. So The Way of Kings is picking up quite a bit of steam when it comes to pop culture. There are quite a few people picking up Brandon Sanderson's books that aren't necessarily fantasy readers. They just have heard good things and are picking up the book. And this is all without an adaptation. There's one VR video game that's in existence. There's one album, it's from the Black Piper, and that's kind of it. That's all we've gotten from for adaptations of The Way of Kings. And the VR video game is very, I don't want to say bad, but it's not great. So that's all we have. So as we move forward with pop culture and things, what is your guys's most anticipated medium of adaptation for The Way of Kings? Whether that be video game, movie, TV show, what have you, anything else I'm not thinking of. What are you guys looking forward to the most for an adaptation? Tim, I'll start with you.
Okay, cool. I was not expecting that. What I had here, after the incredible work that I've heard was done with most of Game of Thrones, I've not watched it myself, not particularly my cup of tea, so to speak. I am really excited for a live action TV show because I think it's something they could do, and it could be incredible. And there's some interesting things they would have to overcome to make sure that they're still making it true to the book, which a TV show is just so much easier than a movie. Cough cough, Aragon. And I think it could be really well done. However, I would also enjoy if they went the route of an animated TV show. I've not watched a lot. I've only watched a couple here and there, but the animated medium could be. I think it could be better in some ways for making it so you don't have actors putting on this bulky and weird shard plate, and how are you going to make that work? And then also just being able to get certain details accurate, that you're not having to worry about scene and setting in the real world, because that would be very difficult. And most of it would probably end up having to be CGI anyway if you did go the route of live action. But I would say that's probably my most anticipated, the one I'm most excited for.
So I'll weigh in on this in a second, but I'll let Paul go first because this is also your most anticipated, is it not?
This is, yes. Specifically with a live action TV show, like Tim mentioned, there's a lot of pretty recent shows that have showcased One, I think we have the power to make outstanding TV shows like Game of Thrones, and there are many others that, even in like a mythical world with lots of CGI and created elements, it looks outstanding. So I think we're definitely like ready for that, and to make this like a very, very high quality. The reason why I specifically think it should be a TV show, um, there's a lot of storylines that could not be tied up in movies. I think unless you had another like Marvel universe almost. Um, but with TV shows specifically, I think you could present it in a way that would not line up exactly with the books, but ultimately later on it would kind of finish together. So I think you could start. I feel like the biggest challenge, by the way, would be you have these multiple storylines going on at once, and how do you tie that together? I think you could start well with Kaladin as your protagonist, going through his story. And let's say about 5 or so episodes in, you start to drop in part of the episodes, you start to be introduced to Shalon and Dalinar and these other aspects of the world. And then you kind of grow from there. And especially with a multiple seasons thing, you could have, your season one kind of going with Kaladin and then expanding into the other characters. And then as you go into the other seasons, kind of focusing more on the other characters, having episodes more focused one way than the other. And I feel like it could do a lot of justice to that, as well as just having the freedom of multiple seasons would allow you to fit in all the information you need to in all those scenes. But I think specifically a live action TV show would be super epic. I think it could be very well done with the technology we have and just look outstanding. That would be my only argument over an animated film. Is I think it could look amazing with live action.
So, I mean, here's kind of the elephant in the room that we're kind of mentioning, but not really, is it's almost impossible to make a classic blockbuster movie. It's near impossible. I can't think of a way to do it well.
I think the only way you could make this into one, 2.5, 3 hour movie is if you dropped Shalon completely. You'd have to cut storyline out of the movie and just make a Kaladin Dalinar movie, and even then it'd be a stretch.
Yeah. And the way, or there's a couple things that that make the movie extremely hard is your female lead in Shalon and your male lead in Kaladin never interact ever. The entire story, they don't say a word to each other. They don't know each other exist. So that just the fact that you have a female lead and a male lead that fans are going to want them to interact and they don't for the entire story makes it really hard to do in a movie. You can do that in a TV show because you can have, you can jump back and forth between characters over here, characters over there, and it works better that way. But to have it at the end of, like, at the end of the story, they don't even meet yet. Like, how do you have a full resolution of a movie without your female lead and your male lead meeting? It just wouldn't work. The second one, the second thing that really lends itself to not being a movie and more of a TV show is the location doesn't change. And if you think about TV shows, most TV shows are centered around one location and characters moving in and out of that location. The main storyline is in one spot.
Yeah, there's like a few notable sets,
right?
But it's not like always moving. Yeah, for the most part, yeah.
In a movie, you want to have gone somewhere. Like, maybe you end up in the same spot at the end, but you need to move somewhere to feel like the story is moving. That's not the case with a TV show. So, that's why we're bringing up TV show, I think, is because those are the two main things. Is there anything else that you guys think, besides just the length of it, that would be hard for a movie?
I agree with everything you guys are saying, though. A movie pretty off the table. If I learned that, tomorrow that they were going to make a movie of of the Wave Kings. Tim, you mentioned already what I would be terribly afraid of is another Aragon, another maybe a quarter of the story plucked out and poorly stitched together. I'd be scared. I'd be really scared that they were gonna butcher it. I think even with a live action TV show, I'd be a little nervous just because there's so much magic and so much large scale stuff going on in here. It would have to be a top of the line AAA high budget show. I don't think there's any of this without a lot of really good props, a lot of high quality CGI, just the kind of nature of the scale of things that are happening in here. It would have to be AAA quality. Otherwise, I think it would fall pretty hard.
I agree.
Yeah, I would imagine this is like if the Lord of the Rings TV show that's going to be coming out and the Wheel of Time that they're making, if those do well, moving on from the hype of that, they could go into something like the Stormlight Archive.
Yeah.
I agree.
Something that I would be hesitant for with an animated series versus a live action series is animated TV shows usually are lower budget because there are less people involved. And I think you need all of the animators you could get to really do it justice because there's so much content. And like for an animated TV show versus an animated movie, I think of How to Train Your Dragon. If you've ever watched the How to Train Your Dragon shows on Netflix, they are way, way worse than the movies. They are like the animation is bad. The voice acting is like rushed. Like you can tell that these voice actors had one day to do this and they are reading their lines. And that's just how the show is. It's a very low budget, very rushed versus the animated movies, which I think are some of the best animated movies ever. So that's the only hesitation I would have for an animated TV show is because I don't think we've seen an animated TV show yet that would do the Stormlight Archive justice. Story-wise, absolutely. You have The Last Airbender, stuff like that, that like have the content, they just don't have the visuals that I think Stormlight Archive would demand.
So I think as exciting and awesome as a really well done TV series would be, live action TV series, I think honestly the adaptation I'm looking forward to the most that I think could be maybe the most exciting would be a video game, actually. Kind of back to the idea that this series requires investment from the reader. I think a video game caters to that kind of system really well. In order to really get into a video game, that requires a lot of just time, but some thought and some practice or training or whatever on the part of the players to really get into a video game. That meshes really well with, I think, how the book itself is written. And so I think a really well done video game would be really, really exciting. Either I think something on the epic scale of like an RPG would be the obvious choice, something that really has that depth for you to explore the world and let you kind of get to different magic systems and different races and different places that you can visit. I think that would all be super cool. I think honestly, if I had to pick like a dream adaptation, I think what I'd love to see is a co-op RPG where it's required that you have, I suppose you can maybe have like an AI or something play the second character, but a model where you play as an unknown or brand new Radiant, and your co-op player is your Spren, your honor Spren, like Syl is, and the two of you have to grow and unlock new abilities, and you have to go and save the world, explore all these different locations. You could interact with the main storyline. You could maybe somehow tie into some of the event. I'm assuming maybe future books would be better for this, but meet Dalinar or meet Kaladin or meet Zeth or have some interactions with those, but not necessarily play as those characters. Get to create your own Knight Radiant, get to pick your order or take the test and then get placed in your order. That'd be a dream of mine.
So I don't know how much you've kept up with epic RPGs in the recent history, but there have been quite a bit of PlayStation exclusives. The two that come to mind for me right now is The Last of Us and it's not exclusive, but Red Dead Redemption. Those two have been really, really good for immersion, is what everybody says. There's a couple other ones like Detroit Become Human and Spider-Man as well. But there's quite a few recent games like kind of what you're talking about that are just full on RPGs, and you kind of immerse yourself, and it's just a 10-hour console game type of thing. And I think what you're saying is the co-op thing would be really cool, assuming like one of your co-op is your friend, and then you have to like grow in your abilities with them, and then you can combo things with your friend to get
synchronize
powers.
your actions. Yeah,
that'd be really cool. I really agree. As for me, I also think a video game adaptation would be the best way to do this. And for me, it is a full-on World of Warcraft style MMORPG. And so this is coming from the perspective from someone who's played Lord of the Rings Online for quite a few hours. And long Lord of the Rings...
By quite a few, folks, he means thousands and thousands.
Yes, by...
Over years, yeah.
Yes. So, long Lord of the Rings Online rant aside, the attention to detail that they have in that game is this really the selling point for me. Like, it's not the most beautiful game, although I do think it's a very pretty game. It's not the most entertaining game as it comes to like entertainment, like wow, that was really fun. But it is the most immersive game that I've ever played, because their attention to detail and their love of Tolkien that they've had going into it, they've crafted it with such care, and it's so big, like the game is huge, that a game exactly like that, maybe not exactly, there are a couple of improvements you can have, but a game very much like that, adapted to the Stormlight Archive, and even the whole Cosmere as a whole, if we can always dream, but a Stormlight Archive MMORPG I think would be really, really cool. I don't know if I will ever get to play such a game ever, but we can always hope, right?
I would put a lot of hours in that game, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, they could do something like what Lord of the Rings Online has done, with just gradually making it larger and larger, and
Yeah.
just as the story progresses, and hey, a new book comes out and you can add new content with that.
Right.
That is one of my favorite styles of video games. And I would really enjoy that.
You could like have a shard blade, and your shard blade could, level up with you and all sorts of cool things. All right. So whether it be TV show, movie, whatever, on a screen, what would you guys be what scene in The Way of Kings would you be most anticipated to see? Whether it be animated, live action, video game, whatever. Mine is the Wandersail. I think going out on the Shattered Plains, finding Hoyd and having Hoyd talk to you about the Wandersail, and seeing those visuals of him with his flute and the smoke like dancing for Kaladin, I think that would be awesome to see. Anybody else?
For sure. So mine, if I had to pick a top scene in a movie or a show or a game or anything like that, it would be the first spotlight we have of Kaladin, I guess, showcasing his surge binding, where he's dodging the arrows and kind of zipping around, and the Parshendi are super upset with him. As soon as we read that part of the book, I just instantly could envision that, and I think it would be what would be most exciting to watch.
Yeah, I would most anticipated, somewhat because it would be the first part, but the prelude. Whether you're gonna add that in as like the opening cutscene of a video game or any adaptation. If they were going to do that prelude where you're meeting those characters who abandon their fellow, and just the epicness of that whole situation, and kind of like when you turn on Fellowship of the Ring and everything goes dark, and then Kate Blanchett's voice comes on, and you're like, oh, wow, this is an awesome movie. I'm just imagining like, oh, you're so excited, so much anticipation, or you're like, I wonder what's gonna happen, and that opening cutscene, and you're just like, this is epic. What am I getting into?
I think it's kind of be funny to. It would also lend itself to a tutorial, like it could just like have a grand scheme of this epic battle that's just ended, and then it just drops you behind Kalak, and then you have to walk up to the shard blades like over there, and then you kind of just walking around a little bit, observing the
Press
whole battle.
F to pick up your shard blade.
Exactly.
Press
Yeah.
F to input shard blade.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So my, I think, most anticipated scene would actually be the one that Paul predicted from like the very beginning, and that's Kaladin strung up in the high storm itself. I think that moment could be depicted so powerfully, where not just the like physical energy of that, I think you could really just show how violent the high storms are, more than just like footage you've seen of like a hurricane, showing that power, showing Kaladin fighting so hard against it, showing Syl like in front of him, trying to hold back the storm, and then him entering into that calm where he meets the Stormfather for the first time. I think that's a whole scene that I just can't quite wrap my mind around. I want to see so badly someone show that in, a full CGI as it's envisioned in Brandon Sanderson's mind kind of scene. I think it would be really, really cool.
I agree. I completely agree with that one. It's a very good scene.
Would be.
All right. Any closing thoughts for our finale episode of The Way of Kings? We have Words of Radiance in front of us, but as for The Way of Kings, we are finished. Any closing thoughts?
I do have some closing thoughts. And in fact, I took it upon myself to write a little something to summarize our experience here in the Way of Kings. I loved how in our last episode you Trevor took us into the end note of the Way of Kings, and you showed us how that little poem that's written in the end note there is a description for something that's the same, in the two directions. You can fold it onto itself. Symmetrical. Thank you, Tim.
What?
Okay.
That's the word you couldn't think of.
It's symmetrical.
Yeah,
It's symmetrical.
you'd already said that one.
I loved that little poem that was symmetrical, was attributed to the different titles of the parts. And I thought that was fantastic. And I had to stare at it really hard for a little while to try and wrap my mind around it. And I thought that was such a fun little device there that I took it upon myself to try and write my own Ketek for the Way of Kings. And I tried to pull as much of the content of the Way of Kings into it as I could. So this is probably terrible, but it is my attempt at a Ketek to summarize the Way of Kings for you guys. Honor builds a true bond, speaking the binding truth built in honor. Like
Wow.
a Ketek, you probably have to read it in
Yeah.
order to see some of the symmetry in it. I can copy and paste it into the.
Can you
into
give
the
it to us one
outline
more
for you
time?
guys? Yep. Let me paste it so you guys can see it. It's going to be towards the top of the outline. But yeah, one more time. Honor builds a true bond, speaking the binding truth, built in honor. And I took a little bit of creative license with the description that you get in the endnote, where they say you can change, verb tenses and kind of the forms of the words, but it's pretty close to the same forward and backwards. And I tried to have the 5 different concepts, if you will, so you can break it up into 5 different blocks if you try. But
Yeah.
that was my attempt at a symmetrical ketek to summarize Way of Kings.
Wow, I'm very impressed. That's really cool.
That is, I'm impressed. Whenever we read that before and learned what a ketek was, I was like, there's only like so many of these you could write. Right? There's probably like 4 in the world, they're very, very difficult. So I'm impressed.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to spend some time marinating on that.
Yeah.
I'm reading through the Lays of Beleriand because I found that I just love reading Tolkien's poetry.
Yeah.
Kind of a similar thing there.
Cool. All right. With those words from Eliot, I think we can close this episode. Thank you for joining me in the Way of Kings, Paul and Eliot, and thank you for guesting on this episode, Tim.
And thank you to Brandon Sanderson for writing such an amazing work that we get to read and discover. Fantastic work.
To Sanderson.
Oh, yeah. To Sanderson.
Hydration. Let's go.
Hydration. Water.
Hydration station.
Yes.
All right. See ya.
Farewell.
Sayonara.
Next time.